Spinning records, got the lights down low. Souldisco, where the groovy people go. Hit play, let the music flow. Old school beats with a modern glow.
Hello everybody and a very warm welcome back to the latest episode of Hidden Jewels of Soul and Disco. I do hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. In this week's episode we are featuring a group which is very dear to me, an absolute iconic and legendary group, Tavares.
Listen, what kind of band is Tavares?
It's a band. It's a group. It makes, I hope, nice music. That's all, you know, for music for people to listen to and to form their own opinions about what they are. Okay.
What kind of music we do, you know? We like all music, you know. We think we have a little bit of everything that we can put into our music. So it's all types. We even do a little country and western. Mm-hmm. Do bar mitzvah music. Yeah. No.
It's not important for you to know what the difference is.
Oh yeah, we know the difference in the music that we do, but we try to please everybody, you know.
What's the most important thing? To get people dancing or to go to their heart?
Go right to the heart. Right to the heart. You get the heart, you can get them dancing, right? Yeah. Then you get the feet. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, what else are the plans for the future?
Well, we've got a soundtrack in a movie that should be in Holland soon, Saturday Night Fever.
It'll be G's, right?
Yeah, we did a song in a movie called More Than a Woman. For the future, we got more tours coming up in South America and probably to Australia. We hope we do more movies, soundtracks, you know. It's hard to say. We just want to keep on progressing as much as we can.
This tour first.
Disco has its iconic legends. The Bee Gees, Donna Summer, Chic. And it also has artists whose impact is just as real, even if they are not always the first names people mention in the same breath. Tavares belong in that conversation. A family vocal group with serious R&B roots, a run of era-defining dance records and harmonies so tight they still sound like a blueprint decades later. This is the story of how they came up with their disco reputation, which sometimes hide what they really were, and how one Bee Gees song ended up becoming one of the most famous double appearances on a soundtrack in music history. Tavares were an American family group raised up between Providence, Rhode Island and New Bedford in Massachusetts. The best known lineup is 5 brothers. We have Ralph, Arthur, Antoine, Feliciano and Perry. If you've ever wondered why their records feel so unified, why the harmonies lock so naturally and the blend feels lived in rather than assembled, well, that's the reason. They weren't put together in a studio as a project, they grew up together. And the sound reflects it. Long before disco era, the brothers were already working. By 1959, they were performing as kids under the name Chubby and the Turnpikes. And the youngest brother was only 9 years old. That early start matters because it explains what you hear. Not just good singers, but performers who had already done the reputation, learning the discipline and build the instincts that only come from night after night experience. They weren't waiting for a moment, they were building towards one. The early journey also includes the kind of behind-the-scenes music history. Details that remind you how connected scenes can be. The group's orbit crossed with major musicians early on, and the broader point is simple. They weren't amateurs who stumbled into a trend. They were a real working vocal group with a professional foundation before the world put them under any label. Well, speaking of labels, before Tavares was the name, they went through phases. At one point, they were calling themselves the Del Rios. And the story goes that management didn't think the name meant anything. So they pushed the group into the Turnpikes identity that eventually became Chubby and the Turnpikes. It's one of those classic music business moments. You try names, someone convinces you a certain one will work, and you carry it because you're trying to move forward. But the name that would last, the name everyone knows, arrived through something very practical. Touring outside the United States, when they went to perform in Italy with Lola Falana, the word turnpike didn't translate well. The audiences didn't know what it meant, and someone around them pointed out the obvious solution. Why not just use your own family name, Tavares? And once it was said out loud, it clicked. They'd been Tavares all their lives, but it had never dawned on them to use it as their banner. But when they came back to the States, they came back as Tavares, cleaner, more universal, and perfectly aligned with the truth. This was a family group. Now, when people summarize Tavares in one word, they often go straight to disco. But if you listen closely and if you pay attention to how they talked about themselves, Tavares always saw their core as R&B. That's not a contradiction. Disco at its best isn't the opposite of R&B. It's one of the places R&B went when dance floors became the center of pop culture. The important part is that Tavares didn't start as a disco act. They were an R&B vocal group who became major disco hitmakers. And the difference matters because it changes how you hear the music. The harmonies aren't decoration, they are structure. The groove isn't a custom, it's a foundation. The first major breakthrough under the Tavares name came with Check It Out, a record that opened the door nationally and proved the group wasn't just a regional story. Here's a detail most casual listeners don't know. On that early hit, the lead vocal is credited to their brother Victor, a sixth brother who was briefly part of the early recording era and then left the group very early on. That's one reason fans sometimes feel that the lead vocal on Check It Out sits a little more differently compared to what you hear on later classics. You're hearing a slightly different front voice while the family blend in is still there underneath. From there, the momentum builds fast. And if you're looking for an original copy of Check It Out, they are out there and they are available because they have been hugely successful. And for me, this is a great entrance point into the catalog of Tavares. In 1974, Tavares landed a major R&B milestone with their version of She's Gone from Hall & Oates. That song in Tavares' hands became a big statement and reached #1 on the R&B charts. It's an important part of the story because it proves the point. Even before the huge disco era singles, they were already winning as an R&B group. Then comes 1975, the year that for many listeners locks in the signature sound. The album In the City is a key record in their catalog and includes what might be their most instantly recognizable smash. It Only Takes a Minute. That song is built like a perfect dance record. Driving groove, bright lift, chorus that lands immediately, and harmonies that feel effortlessly because they aren't. They're practice. They are engineered by years of singing together. And what's also fascinating is how far that song traveled. Years later, it reappeared in the UK mainstream through a major cover by Take That, which is one of the clearest examples of how chorus jumping generations without losing its power. In 1976, Tavares hit that full disco soul peak with Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel. Big intro, big energy, big hooks, and it sits inside what many fans treated as their defining peak era album, Sky High. If In the City is a breakthrough that established them as a major hit-making force, Sky High is the album that places them right in the center of the era's sound. Polished, confident, and built for dance floors around the world. It also includes Don't Take Away the Music, another record that has never really left rotation because it's built on something timeless. A melody you can sing and groove, which you just can't resist. And this is also where the group's disco label started striking hard. And the brothers have said there was some resistance to being put in that box at the time, not because they disliked disco, but because they didn't want their roots erased. Over time, they also recognized the other side of it. Being tied to that era ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to them, because that era became a permanent cultural reference point, and their songs represent some of its best work. Now we reach the pop culture accelerator, Saturday Night Fever.
Where do you go when the record is over? John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever.
This is the moment where Tavares stopped being just a hit group and become part of an era-defining global object. The way it happened is almost cinematic on its own. After a show at Madison Square Garden, the Bee Gees, excited and impressed, told them they were working on a movie called Saturday Night Fever and wanted Tavares involved. Later, the call came. They wanted Tavares to sing More Than a Woman. Tavares went into the studio and did what real artists do. They didn't just copy a demo. They put their own arrangement on it. But then the movie went through major changes, including a director change while the film was heading towards release. And suddenly, the scene where More Than a Woman was supposed to sit didn't match Tavares' arrangement. The Bee Gees versions fit the scene that had already been shaped, and Tavares were told their version wouldn't be used. That's when the business side arrived, because I couldn't have hold this single here in my hand, which is a German one, and it includes on the bottom Nur Samstagnacht, which was the German title for Saturday Night Fever. So what happened? Well, the legal and contractual realities is that the result is part of a story that confuses people even today. The solution was to create an additional moment in the movie, so Tavares' version could be used without triggering legal fallout. That's why the film contains two versions of the same song, one by the Bee Gees and one by Tavares. And here's the detail that makes it even more legendary. On the official soundtrack of Saturday Night Fever, More Than a Woman appears twice, like in the movie, the Bee Gees version and the Tavares version. One song, two interpretations, both preserved as part of one of the most famous soundtracks ever released. The soundtrack went on to win the Grammy for Album of the Year. And the cleanest way to say it is that Saturday Night Fever was a Grammy-winning album, and Tavares were part of that Grammy-winning cultural moment through their featured recording. After the late 70s peak, Tavares kept recording into the next decade, and this is where another important album comes along. Supercharged from 1980. And also here it is in all of its 1980 glory. By the way, I love the cover art of it. Also this one, if you want to have it as an original copy, they are out there and they are available. This album is a strong example of how they adapted as the sound of radio shifted. Slicker production, early 80s R&B polish, but the vocal identity remains intact. The standout single is Bad Times, and it became a significant R&B hit, and the record shows that they weren't done when the disco label started fading from the mainstream conversation. So if you are building a short starter kit for someone who wants to understand Tavares beyond the greatest hits playlist, two essential albums are In the City for the breakthrough that defined their hit-making power, and Sky High for the peak era full glow disco sound. Then you add the early door opener era with Check It Out, and you add the next decade bridge with Supercharged. 4 points on this timeline, one consistent through line. Voices first. There are also two UK-specific pieces of the story that deserve attention. First, Tavares have always spoken about the UK as a special place for them, an audience that embrace them deeply and keep embracing them, even across generations. Second, there's a Northern Soul connection. Early Turnpike era singles became highly valued in collectors and dance circles, which is a reminder that the dance credibility didn't begin in 1976. It was already present earlier, just in a different scene. And then there's the human side, the part that explains why the timeline looks the way it does. In 1984, Ralph stepped away from the group for stability because even after major success, the music business can be unpredictable in the most practical ways. In 2014, everything changed again when Pooch suffered a devastating stroke. Ralph returned to fill that space and the group adjusted because at the end of the day, it was always a family story, as much as it was a music story. Pooch recovered to the point where he could still sing, but he chose not to return to the stage, which is a decision that makes sense when you think about what touring demands physically and mentally. Some of the most revealing details about artists aren't chart's position. They are the small personal reference points. One early touchstone was Elvis Presley's blue suede shoes. And one early live memory that left a mark was seeing Little Richards perform in Massachusetts. Exactly the kind of performer who teaches you in one night what stage energy really means. And when asked what song really means a lot to the group, Ralph points out To the Other Man from the Sky High album, explaining that it was dedicated to their mother. Those aren't trivia details. They tell you what kind of performers they were and what kind of emotional world sat underneath the polish. In 2024, their hometown recognition became official in a way that hits differently than any award. New Bedford honored them by renaming a street Tavares Brothers Way. A community claiming its own is a special kind of legacy, one that doesn't depend on trends or algorithms.
What does this mean to you, Chubby?
What does that mean to me? I know that it's good to feel that I come all the way from Florida to see all the hard work that we have done throughout the years.
I'm glad you were able to make it.
Very important. I wasn't going to not make it. I told my girlfriend, I said, there's no way that I'm not going to make that.
So you look around, you see all family and friends. It must be so touching.
What it's about. When we're gone, they're going to be gone. When we're gone, they got it.
Your connections to the city of New Bedford special.
Born here. St. Louis Hospital.
Recognize like going in like grade school that it was a little bit different. Like we got gold records on the wall. We got friends come over. They're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, it's a gold record." Like, what? So we knew probably like elementary school age that this was a very different kind of household and a different kind of family. Wow.
I feel we worked so hard for it. And still ain't done yet. Thank God every morning when I wake up that I live to see another day. I want to thank you all. Well, I have a hard time speaking, but you know where I'm coming from. Okay. Good purpose.
And if you're wondering where the story stands now, there's no way to say it without acknowledging the losses. 3 of the 5 classic best-known brothers have passed away. Ralph in December of 2021, Pooch in April of 2024, and Chubby in November of 2025. As of January 2026, the surviving members of the classic lineup are Butch and Tiny. And that fact doesn't diminish the music. It underlines what the music always was. A family captured in harmony. So when you press play on a Tavares song, you're not just hearing disco, you are hearing an R&B vocal group that meant the biggest dance era of the 20th century at exactly the right moment and delivered songs strong enough to outlive the era itself. Start with It Only Takes a Minute, Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel, Don't Take Away the Music, and their version of More Than a Woman. And then you can go deeper into the album In the City, Sky High, Check It Out, and Supercharged. If you do that, you hear the full picture, hits, roots, and evolution held together by one thing that never changed, the unmistakable family blend. I personally have a very deep connection to Tavares. I met them a couple of times during live shows and also on private matters, and I found some pictures in my archive where I somehow share the stage with the legendary group. So this feels like it was a different live, but as you can see, this is me, obviously, in the white shirt, and this is Tavares being live. I feel very privileged to witness the connection between the brothers firsthand, and their stage presence was absolutely wonderful. So, like I said in the beginning, if you are looking especially for the 70s material, it's out there, it's available. And also mentioned the early recordings with the Turnpikes can get a little expensive because nowadays it's very sought after. But labeling this group as it's disco, I'm not hearing it because I don't like disco. For me, disco never died. Anyway, give them a chance. They very much deserve it. And you hear, when I witnessed sound checks, they didn't need a sound check because they worked blended into so perfectly together. They sounded so perfectly together. It was absolutely astonishing sitting or standing next to the stage and witnessing this. So I highly recommend that you check out this group. If you like the video, I also highly recommend that you check out the playlist appearing here, and I catch you on the next one.